How do you soldiers? Oh yeah, there it is, peeking through. I just got my sleeve touched up the other week, so now I'm like, ah yes, every single collarbone bearing shirt known to man, I want it. In my grizzled, wizened 25 years of life and 8+ years of book blogging, I've just found that books labeled as a new adult don't tend to be very good or have very healthy messages in them. A very popular video on my channel is when I talk about actually good new adult books, and I do explain the majority of new adult and new adult politics in that video, so you can go watch it if you want, but I think I'll give a little crash course here just in case this is your first video of mine you're watching. Hi, hello, welcome. So as you can see, I read a lot of young adult literature, where the main character is usually between ages 13 and 18, and new adult literature has protagonists usually 18 to 24-ish. Whereas in young adult you have things like first love, self-identity, maybe some family issues. In new adult books you have things that new adults would go through. So like a lot of these take place in a contemporary college, so, you know, living away from your parents for the first time, being self-sufficient, gaining confidence in yourself, your first real relationship, and some gritty fun things like gray morality and sexuality and mental health and those things you can't really quite get into properly in a book with teenagers in it. But there's been a big focus lately on making new adult a thing, because technically it's not a recognized genre, but a lot of people who write adult books have a protagonist that's 23 and like figuring their life out, and those books are getting categorized by readers as new adult, even if that's not what it would show up as online. Personally, I really like the idea of new adult, and I think this should be a thing because I am 25. I don't really feel like reading about some 45-year-old divorcee who's out to murder her husband and, you know, has a custody battle for kids, because that's not something I'm interested in. But I'm also kind of over the like perky 16-year-old with a sword making bad choices, and I'm like, okay, we need some common sense here. Like, can someone figure out that they're the chosen one once they're 24 and like have some life experience behind them and know that to go charging into battle or drink that thing that the villain gives you is not the greatest choice? And then another thing I want to mention that I didn't get to discuss in the first iteration of this video is that new adult can also be very tricky to define because it's not technically a real genre, and the content of new adult and young adult is constantly becoming blurred, and there's a lot of more graphic violence and sexuality and mental health that are bleeding into young adult novels, but it still is a very similar audience, and there's a lot of blurred lines and gray area. And one more thing I want to say is that the majority of books I'm going to recommend today happen to be sci-fi fantasy. Even though I've tried a multitude of times, I still find the majority of new adult romance books to be very abusive and have unhealthy relationships, and not in a way that I can fantasize about. So, that being said, let's go over my own personal list of some more actually good new adult books. I'm going to start off with the author that most people refer to when talking about recommending new adult books, and that is V.E. Schwab. I will argue that The Invisible Life of Addie LaRue, which is another book that many people point at, is not technically new adult because she looks like she's 20 but she's like 300 years old. So A Darker Shade of Magic is one of my personal favorite books, and I won't talk too much about it because I know a lot of people know it already. This takes place in 4 alternate dimensions of London, and Kel is a blood magician who can travel between them and acts as a smuggler. And one day he smuggles something from one London to another London that he really shouldn't have. Royal politics between multiple dimensions worth of royalty, and we have other blood magicians who are maybe not as heroic as Kel. And we have Lila, who's a street rat turned magician turned pirate, like straight up badass. It's fast, it's magical, I love the different worlds that she built. I will never recommend this enough. I love it so much that I have a tattoo of it on my ankle, as Travars. Then we have Vicious, which is another one that plenty of people know about. This is about 2 terrible people. Victor and Eli are college students who both have the idea that to gain magic powers, they need to die and be brought back from the dead. But when their experiments actually work and they do end up with powers, they are not quite what they expect. And eventually they join forces with other people who have these extraordinary abilities. And also Victor is probably a sociopath. Probably, I say. Definitely a sociopath. This is a great book to dip your toes into gray morality because, again, these are both 2 terrible people, and you're kind of just rooting for whoever isn't worse. And then the big boy that everyone always talks about of loving a new adult is The Priory of the Orange Tree by Samantha Shannon. Oh, she's thick though. Do you see how big this is? This is like one of the bricks in this tower. Oh my god. Again, I'll skim this a little bit because this has been done to death, especially TikTok, which I'm so happy about. I'm like, yes, young people, please read this book. It's so good. This follows the queen, an assistant, and a dragon rider from across the kingdom as they all think very differently about magic and dragons and bloodlines. It's been 1,000 years since dragons were banished, and that old curse is now wearing off, and they all deal with it in a very different way. Oh my god, we got court intrigue, we got royal politics, we have scary flying flat monsters with the burning inferno mouths, and they're coming for you. This does look very intimidating, but it is also split up into 6 parts. That will make reading it easier for you. I still would highly recommend. You get so much in this book, like so much more than you think you're going to get. So speaking of Samantha Shannon, she's also the author of another one of my favorite book series, and that is The Bone Season. This book is so difficult to sell people because it's so freaking weird. So this takes place in the future, but in an alternative history where people who are magic users are now prosecuted by the wizard cops in this slightly more dystopian sci-fi futuristic London. Our main unnatural character, Paige, is a dream walker, and she's in the middle of the Scion versus unnatural gang wars, but then she also gets kidnapped by these people who are like from a different dimension. Like I said, I'm sure I'm losing many of you right now. When I worked at the bookstore, this scared off multiple customers. As weird as it sounds, this has some of the best world building that I have ever read in a series. It's gonna be 7 books long. The 4th one just came out. I love this world so much. It's so unique and so engrossing. Plenty of likable and unlikable characters. Paige herself is a little bit of an unreliable narrator. If you want something that's a little genre bending or genre blending, this is the one to do so with. Now, last time I talked about Ninth House. Wow, okay. I've either had too much or too little caffeine today. Everybody knows Ninth House by Leigh Bardugo. Snake cover, dark academia realness. If you like Ninth House and you don't know where to go from there, I would highly recommend If We Were Villains by M.L. Rio. Gotta say, I'm taking a Shakespeare class right now. Never gotten this intense. Last week we talked about what reality show each play would be. We have decided that Romeo and Juliet is 90 Day Fiancé and A Midsummer Night's Dream is The Bachelor. Richard III is keeping up with the Kardashians, and for some reason Julius Caesar is Judge Judy. I don't know, I don't make the rules. There are 7 Shakespearean students in this prestigious acting program that have a friendly rivalry when it comes to who gets to play what part. And in the finale play of their 4th and final year, something goes very wrong and they all find themselves on the hook for murder. A modern murder mystery whodunit, all within the confines of dark academia and Shakespeare and, you know, theater kids. Oh god, they're dramatic. I say that as an ex-theater kid who did have to do Shakespeare. We are insufferable, I'm so sorry. This plays with the actual reality of the situation, but also what is being acted and what is being planned. So if you're a theater kid or an English student who wants to watch other English students make bad choices, this is a book for you. Okay, it is time to finally talk about Never a Night by J. Kristoff, which I honestly so mad that I didn't do that in the first book iteration video. In the first video. Oh my god. Never Night takes place in a Venetian-inspired fantasy world where our main character, Mia, joins a school of assassins to be able to get revenge on the people that killed her family. But she is also a shadow mage, and Red Church themselves has a very different idea of what they want her destiny to be. It's fast, it's crass, it's rude, it's very smutty, and the sequels just get gayer and gorier. It's absolutely wonderful. Plus it brings in themes of magic and religion and politics and people rewriting history, and then some assassin shenanigans, and some really cool, weird-ass world building with like multiple suns and black magic. And a detail about this book that I know a lot of people don't like, but I personally love, is that this book has footnotes. So it allows the reader to know more about the world without feeling like they're being info dumped on. You don't have to read the footnotes to get the whole story, but because it's this like sarcastic, snarky narrator, it does add extra knowledge and bias towards people and things and histories in this world. This is one of my favorite books, and I won't ever shut up about it. And then I want to talk about one that I don't have a physical copy of, so through the magic of editing, one will appear right here, and that is The Hallowed Gods by A.J. Vrana. 3 strangers in the town of Black Hollow that all are roped into this mystery that spans centuries long about this magical dream walker abducting young women. The wolves in the surrounding forest being a part of this legend, and the characters all having to work together against this ancient evil who has a grudge against the townsfolk. I spoke with the author about this, and she said that the folklore that's in this book is mainly inspired by Bulgarian, Macedonian, and Serbian folklore, and that lore gives a fresher take on that kind of thing in the woods, especially in British Columbia, which this takes place in, which is my home province, so that's kind of cool. There are some characters in here that don't always make the best choices, but they're also kind of magical, so like, whatever. Like how she wrote a character who is both animalistic and human, so that doesn't quite understand either and kind of messes up because they are not used to being fully human or fully animal. The doctor character is a great representation of what I'm assuming a lot of medical students are going through right now. This nightmare dream world that we get introduced to is so cool, very trippy, very psychedelic, very like something you don't want to get stuck in for all eternity. Everyone's always asking me for new adult thrillers. I think this one is one you definitely should pick up because it doesn't have that completely existential like fantasy element that a lot of these have, but it's also not like a cute summery contemporary romance. Like, it's gritty and dark, has some crass main characters that are making bad decisions, and I loved it. Ooh, okay, so this next one is a book that I figure a lot more people know of than the book I want to talk about next. So if you liked Gideon the Ninth by Tamsin Muir, I would highly recommend Winter's Orbit by Evarina Maxwell. First of all, black pages, major selling point. Gideon the Ninth is sci-fi lesbian necromancers in space. We got a fantasy sci-fi genre blend, and it works so well. This is also an incredibly bloody book, and I absolutely loved it. Like, I'm not a hardcore sci-fi person. I just want, you know, some space mumbo jumbo, some imagery about stars, and then someone just goes astrophysics, and I'm like, ah, yes, perfect. There are 9 houses of necromancer families across space, and all of the heirs of these houses are called to this backwater planet to play a game of wit and skill. She did the research to make sure that everything that she wrote would fit into place, and that everything is believable even though it is so outlandish. Bone magic meeting technology, but also having intense political drama and reluctant lovers and old rotting gothic mansions on a whole separate planet. It's phenomenal. Warning right now, Harold the Ninth gets real freaking weird. So if maybe Gideon's a little too weird for you, let's talk about Winter's Orbit, which I just finished. And it was so good. We had more gays in space with political drama, which I love. Prince Kim is a spare heir to the throne, and when he is forced into a political marriage to someone who used to be married to his cousin, who died under mysterious circumstances, the story happens. Neither of them wants to get married to one another, but they find themselves in the middle of a planet-wide conspiracy about war and the different kinds of cultures and like surrounding planets. Plus he starts finding out more things about his betrothed's past, and sparks fly. I will die for both Kim and Jai. No questions asked. They are my cinnamon roll boys, and I love them so much. This book gave me so many feelings. Like, it has the interpersonal connections and the space politics of the general known universe of their, like, sector of space. But then it also alludes to so many new, cool, weird things that are, like, outside of the book that I wanted this to be a series. It's just a standalone, but I'm like, oh my gosh, I want so much more. But it also didn't feel like she was missing anything from this book. I cannot recommend it highly enough. Okay, my voice is going, so we're gonna wrap this up with one final one from an author you might recognize. Tris Pryor, step aside, because Sloane is on the scene in Chosen Ones by Veronica Roth. Now that I think about it, this is very similar to Vicious. I guess I have a type when it comes to books. I love the premise behind this book so much because it's something that we don't get to explore in young adult books. In young adult books, you have the chosen one doing their thing, slaying the enemy, and then everything's great. We get together with the love interest happily ever after. This book expands on that because we follow 5 ex-chosen ones who saved the world 10 years ago and are now dealing with the repercussions of being a teen hero. All of these people are dealing with their past and their PTSD in various ways. One of them is like a YouTube celebrity. One of them just wants a regular, quiet, normal life. And Sloane herself is still really struggling with the mental health issues that she had when she was kidnapped by the villain. The book really deep dives into trauma, not only because of a catastrophic event, but also all the triggers afterward of how the media treats you, how your family treats you, what they expect of you having been a chosen one, even what the world at large expects from you, and what you expect from the world after you've kind of fixed their problem, and the new problems that arise because of this. Like, oh, there's so much in here that like makes you think. And the only thing I would say about this is that I didn't quite like the pacing. But if that's something that you can overlook or you don't care, I would highly recommend checking this out, just because it's such a cool and interesting and well-explored concept. Okay. We're done. That's it. Golf claps for another video on good new adult literature. The books have been discussed, my voice is gone, my coffee is empty. We have come to the end of the video. Please leave down below if you have yourself any recommendations for good new adult books. I know everybody's kind of threshold of what they think is appropriate or where the line of like fantasy and reality is gonna be different, which is a major argument that I get a lot, because I'll say like, oh, this book is like really damaging and unhealthy, but other people are like, well, it doesn't really matter that there's this dominant fallen angel, bad boy, high school bully, you know, like emotionally abusing that girl, because I know that this isn't real, and, you know, his abs are the fantasy that I need. And, like, you know, fair, great, you do you. I just personally like books that are more realistic portrayals of relationships or people's experiences. I just don't really care if it's in a college dorm or if it's in a college dorm in space, you get me? Also, if you got through this and you felt like there wasn't enough contemporaries, because this one was very, like, sci-fi fantasy heavy, my other video, which is somewhere, has majority contemporary stuff. So go check that out. You know where to click to like the video, you know where to click to subscribe. I hope you guys are all having a nice day wherever you are, and I will see you all next week. Bye!